Hello everyone, welcome to Katharine's Creatures. This is episode 93, and this is a series where we're going to talk a little bit about or touch base upon various mythological creatures, beast beings, and the like pulled from lore worldwide. And I always preface by saying that I'm not a linguist, so if I mispronounce anything, I apologize in advance. I do try my best. Now, with that said, I'm going to go over to a Germanic mythological entity, and though it's associated with Germany and that mythos, it's actually a very wide-ranging entity found all over throughout Scandinavia, England, Iceland, Estonia, and again, it has pretty much as many names as it does locations. So overall, I'm going to call it the Nixy, but it's also, just to give you a few of the names, and I'll list a couple below, are the Näcken, Nøkk, Nix, Nicor, and various spellings of all of them above. Nix, and as I said, I'll try to refer to it as the Nixie in general, but essentially this is some kind of a water-based shape-shifting entity, usually has a humanoid form, but the question has been if it actually has a true form of its own, or because it shapeshifts so often that it really doesn't have its own form and just takes the illusion of various creatures, entities, things, objects, and we'll get to that a little bit more later. But it is a water-based creature. And because of its unusual stories, and again, the variability within it, the stories, it's been associated with a whole variety of other creatures as well. But not to get ahead of myself, now, more often than not, you'll find that the names, depending on the spelling and the pronunciation, will refer if the Nix is male or female. Typically, more often, you're going to find it being a male creature versus a female. But Nix, N-I-X, is an example of a male name for it. If it's N-I-X-E, Nix or Nixie, it's more of a female entity, kind of along the lines of a mermaid-like creature. But like I said, it's been associated with a whole variety of other entities, everything from the English Knocker, which is a little more of a dragon or one of those mythological worm-like creatures, to things like kelpies, the water horses, you may have heard some about. I think I've actually talked about the kelpie, so reference back to that one if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But the etymology of the name Nix for Nixie stems from potentially a few sources. One is like an old common Germanic, which had a word very similar, which meant to wash. There's an old Swedish word talking about nude or being naked. And then there's also an old High German word that could have been pulled from or stems from, which translates kind of to like crocodile or water monster. All could be true because the Nixie being this shapeshifter, water-based entity, all kind of seem applicable. Now, in the Nordic side of things, again, a couple of the names that you might find or hear is the Knack or Knock. And in those versions, the Nixie plays the violin. It actually is a musician and can play beautiful music, so much so that one of the reasons why it plays music is to lure women and children to the water for the purpose of drowning them. And in particular, the most susceptible to this charmed music are pregnant women and unbaptized children, so you can kind of see the effects of Christianization on that lore right there. But the Nixie is not always evil. Actually, there are plenty of stories where a human woman has fallen in love with this entity, and the Nixie will then live with their human lover for a period of time, but eventually all the stories end up the same. The Nixie returns back to his watery home, which in those stories are usually around either a waterfall or some kind of a brook, and they end up having to leave the world of humankind behind. But they are often, though there's no specific description of them, again, shapeshifter, they're often wearing elegant clothing, so they do have a sense of style, for sure. And when they're in their humanoid forms. Now, again, one of their other very common forms is a horse, and that goes back to the reference of the Kelpie. And so in these circumstances, just like the Kelpie stories, it's a beautiful horse that appears near the water, and it's so gorgeous that everybody just is compelled to try to pet it, capture it, ride it, and as soon as you jump on the back of the Nixie, it takes off to the water with the point of drowning the rider. Now, there are various ways to either stop, hinder, or kill a Nixie. One of the lore is saying the name. If you actually know the entity's true name and you say it aloud, some lore says that is enough to kill it. Definitely enough to startle it. If it's in a horse form, that would be enough to cause it to drop its rider, allow them to swim free and escape, and run home screaming. But some of the other lore is if you can't figure out the name, one story says a way you can kind of almost compel them to your will, particularly to teach them how to do their mystical magic. And in doing that, it almost sounds like a spell. You need 3 drops of blood, a black animal of some sort, and something called a Brunula, I think is how I pronounce it, but essentially it's kind of like vodka. And utilizing and pouring those 3 things into the water, you can use them again in an enchantment to get the Nixie to then teach you its magical music ability. So that's kind of cool as well. But yeah, the Nixie, like I said, is very fascinating. It kind of reminds me a little bit of some kind of fae-like creature, because another story says in order to evade being drowned by it in the water, people would throw in iron into the body of water, and that would prevent the Nixie from drowning the person who chooses to go swimming. And iron is used a lot in fae-like lore. So there's, again, references to the fae, to the Kelpie. Someone even connected it to a dragon-like creature. Very strange. But being a shapeshifter, it takes on all sorts of forms, all kind of animals, but even objects like floating logs. And so just be wary of things swimming in the water is kind of the rule of the story. And actually, in certain points of Scandinavia, they refer to water lilies as Nix roses. So the flowers of this entity, because they grow on the water. But I think it's still on the Scandinavian side versus Germanic side of the storytelling. There's some lore that says that even though the Nixie can change into any quadruped, so any kind of 4-legged animal, whenever it tries to shift into something with horns, particularly like a goat or a sheep, it's unable to produce horns. So that might be a good sign that the creature might not be what you think it is, and it could be a Nixie in disguise. But anywho, if you have any question about this one, there is so much material about this because it is such a wide-ranging creature, this entity. There is a lot of information, lots of stories from all over that you can look up and enjoy. But if you have any questions for me in particular about this or anything else, please leave them in the comments below or reach out to me on any of my other social media. And until next time, everyone, Skål.